Dick Harmon's been covering the Cougars longer than anyone alive, and he's really not that old, so that's saying something. He started at the Daily Herald before moving to the Deseret News, where he's been holding down that for a number of years. You can read his work at Deseret.com. It is an honor to welcome Dick Harmon to the Wise Guys. Dick, good evening.
Testing 1, 2,
Hey,
3.
there you are.
There we go. Dick,
Hey.
we've got you. Did you find the mute button?
Welcome to the Wise Guys.
Yeah, I had to put it on the system microphone. There's two microphone choices here, so we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
The beauty of this global live stream is we just kind of roll with how it goes.
It's very casual. And there's a lesson for everybody joining us. If you're ever on a Zoom call, go with the system microphone. That's the lesson learned from this. So.
Hey, Dick, what are the storylines going into tomorrow? You just put an article out in the Deseret News talking about some of it. What are you looking forward to hearing the most?
You know, I think there's probably two big elephants in the room. One, of course, is the Big 12. What's happening, what preparation is going into joining that league. We've already seen a lot of things that have happened. We've seen some additional staff changes. We've seen an interjection of some money, a renewal of the contract of Kalani Sitake. There's probably a lot of things that have happened that they're not talking about, but maybe they will tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to asking and kind of delving into that. The other thing I think is probably NIL. I mean, NIL right now is a hammer and a wildfire all over college football. It's changed the way coaches think, the way they recruit, the way they have to counter recruit. And I don't know if BYU is going to get that tall in the weeds with that, but I do know that they've been after some recruits that have been offered a tremendous amount of money, $250,000 in some instances. And is BYU going to match that? Are they going to play that game? Do they have some things that they just say are team wide, and we're going to stick with that, and we're not getting in a bidding war with anybody? But yet I know that Mark Pope and both Kalani Sitake are finding out that the kids are. That's one of the first things they say is, "Hey, what about the NIL money?"
So is that going to, Dick, in your mind, is that going to ruin college football if a kid comes on a recruiting visit and the first thing that he wants to talk about is the NIL deal? And my understanding is that there have been some recruits on campus in both football and basketball that when they sat down to have the discussion with the coaches, the very first thing they threw out on the table was, tell me about the NIL program. Is that good for college football?
I don't think it is. I think it's something you have to face and you have to handle and you have to have an answer for. But if that's going to be your first priority, then I don't know why you would choose this school over another one other than money. And there's certainly a lot of things to be offered from University of Oregon that are good. Southern California, tremendous university. The University of Utah has its pluses, a great medical school background, law school. It's got things that they can recruit to. BYU has its unique approach. But if it's going to be NIL money, then I think that, yes, that does change, I think, the whole approach that you have to signing players and what they're interested in. And if they're interested in that, then how are they going to be to coach and to be a teammate and be in the locker room with? And I think that this is a big elephant that's got to be covered in some way in the room.
I was talking to Ty Detmer earlier today and asked him about the portal, which is the other big issue facing college football. And he thinks the portal is doing more damage than the NIL as far as what's changing the game, because he coaches high school kids, and the New Mexicos and the smaller schools that would typically come and look at his guys are going to the portal for quick fixes. One, because there's so many kids in the portal, and he thinks it's costing high school kids the opportunity to be seen, be looked at, and for colleges to take a chance on.
Absolutely. I think it's hurting kids because, you know, if you transfer out of, say, BYU or Utah, and you don't have a solid place to land, but you're hoping to be recruited in that, you may lose your scholarship within a day or two. And then what are you going to do if maybe nobody bites? Yeah. And it could hurt them. And then I think it does hurt high school players, because if you can go get immediate help in the transfer portal, why are you looking at a high school developmental player that maybe might take a year or two?
I think the rule where you don't have to sit out if you transfer the first time.
One-time exception.
I think that's truly the game changer. And if they got rid of that, I think more kids would think twice about leaving because they're unhappy. They just want to play. Well, if you've got to give up a year to go do that, then maybe you take another look back at where you currently are.
You know, Dick, Dave and I last night were talking to Gifford Nielsen, and we were just kind of reminiscing, and Giff was saying, yeah, heck, when I was in practice, I had 2 first-round draft picks in practice with me, pushing me all the time, and Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon, two first-round picks. And he goes, are those days gone? Will you ever, BYU used to stockpile 5 guys. I experienced that. People are like, man, you're only a backup. I'm like, yeah, but I had 2 Davey O'Brien Award winners in front of me and 3 first-team All-Americans and a Hall of Fame NFL player and a guy that should have been a Hall of Fame player if he didn't run around and have sweetness behind him that he had to toss the ball to. That just doesn't happen anymore, because if you're a backup quarterback and you don't think you're going to play, you just leave. So what does that say for depth, even at the big schools these days?
I just have to look right to Jaron Hall. I mean, Jaron Hall was playing behind a number 2 draft pick. He was getting very little playing time. And in this kind of a world of the transfer portal, he probably should have been gone. There's even talk that he was probably looking at transferring, but he didn't, and he stuck it out. And now you're into a real fortunate kind of a turn with BYU quarterbacks right now, where you've got an experienced guy that's been around the block, and he's learning and he's developing, he's getting better. And I think Jaron's going to have a great year. I don't think that would happen if he would have transferred. You also, have Jacob Conover, in this world right now, maybe he should have transferred, but he didn't. And so I think you're in a good spot if you're Aaron Roderick, where you're getting these guys that you can keep them around. It's been proven only a sprained ankle or a sprained shoulder away from starting, and you need to have those guys that have been in the program a long time. And Blaine, you know that better than anybody. Your chance is going to come, and it did against Michigan, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. And I think BYU's got an interest. If Jaron can be a draft pick, and I'm interested to see what you both think about this. If Jaron's a draft pick, now all of a sudden BYU's back in the quarterback business, because you say, listen, you only need to have one really good year here, because we produce NFL quarterbacks. They come here looking for NFL guys. We just went back to back with guys. Am I making that too simple, or is that a reality? All of a sudden guys stay because they figure, if I can play 1 or 2 years here, then that's a ticket. Am I right?
Well, you don't have to wait around as long, and that's true. I don't know that BYU is going to ever have, if he's really good, if they're going to have a senior quarterback. I don't think they're going to stay. So I think you're looking at a sophomore, freshman year, getting a little playing time, maybe get in there as a sophomore or a junior, and then you're gone. If you're really good, you're going to be gone. So, yeah.
Do you think, and we're visiting with Dick Harmon from the Deseret News, and jump on our live stream if you have a question for Dick. We'll pass it on to him and let him answer it here on the show. But when Lavelle Edwards sat Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon down and said, Jim, I want you to redshirt. I'm going to play Mark in the 79 season. If that was in today's environment, would Jim McMahon have stuck around?
No, he wouldn't have done that. You would hope that he wouldn't have. I know that he was not very happy with that.
Yeah,
but he did it. The alternative would be, to set out a year and to do some other things. But no. I mean, they were so lucky to have, Jim McMahon and Mark Wilson and Steve Young and look at Robbie Bosco. I mean, he stuck around for a while, and he got his chance and he made the most of it. He's got a national championship ring. But what we have now is no patience. The grass is always greener. And if I make a move now, then it's all about me. And that can't be good for football.
No, and at some point, the NFL is not going to have any room for all these guys who want to leave to get in. It's so hard to get in to begin with.
Yeah, it is.
When I was at the Super Bowl covering the Eagles and Patriots years ago, the teams came out and they were doing their warm-ups, and I was sitting there going, well, where's the rest of the team? There were 53 guys.
Yeah.
That was it, and all 53 guys want to play next year. And I thought, oh, my gosh, BYU rolls out 110 guys when they play a home game. The Patriots have 53. How do you make that roster? And yet everyone who has a good game thinks, oh, I'm the next guy in. There's only so many spots.
Yeah, you only have to look back to John Beck and, Max Hall. John waited around for his turn. Max waited, he came off a mission early and tried to find his I mean, these things have just been a part of football. And I think BYU's been very, very lucky that they haven't had people bail out very often.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a tribute to people like Aaron Roderick and maybe even Robert and I before them. But, yeah, it's been a good run where you've had quarterbacks believe in the system and in their coaches and in the people around them. And you're lucky if you got that, because that's not the case now.
Well, and I don't want to leave football yet, but before we're done, I feel like NIL and transfer is going to kill basketball faster than it kills football. But before we do that, I want to ask you about this BYU football team, because you've been around a lot of teams. You know what they've got coming back. And I know you've written some articles about this recently. What's your take on this BYU offense? How good can they be this fall?
I think the sky's the limit, Blaine. You've been around football a lot longer than I have, and you've got a son that is a defensive coach out there, and he probably lets you know what he sees on the field. But you've got an offensive line that is 2.5 to 3 deep. They're monsters. I think they probably average 6'7", 310 pounds, and there's 10 of them. And you got Blake Freeland, who I think is an All-America candidate. You got Clark Barrington. These are some of the best linemen that BYU's had in 10 years. And you've got some guys that probably will step up. I love Pay at center, but no, this offensive line is a building block. And I think if you were to ask coaches over the years, whoever they are in the NFL or in college, the biggest building block you have to have is an offensive line, and BYU's got it. So if you go from there and you got a returning quarterback like Jaron Hall with all the experience, now he's had chemistry with his receivers and his tight ends, something he didn't have with Puka Nacua last year at all in the summer because he was injured. But now you've got that coming back. You've got 2 deep threats in him and Romney. You've got tight ends, I think, that are experienced playmakers, fullbacks that are veterans. They're big, they're physical. And you've got Chris Brooks. If Chris Brooks is anything like we think he'll be, the transfer from Cal, to step in and take that load from Tyler Algier, I think you're going to see a balanced, very hard to defend BYU offense with veteran deep linemen that are big and very physical. You go back to the days in the 1980s and late 70s when BYU was dominating the WAC. The thing that the coaches would always say is that they're just so physical. They're so physical up front, we can't match up with them. And then you got the griping about the older players and the return missionary. And that went on for decades and decades as the excuse for these coaches for losing to BYU. But what they had is offensive lineman. Roger French was churning it to the NFL draft, and he was doing it sometimes 2 in a year. I think BYU's getting pretty close to being right there this coming year.
Jim McMahon,
they were back in the days of Roger French.
Jim McMahon told me today, he said, give me 5 guys on the offensive line who want to fight, and I don't care who the receivers are, and I don't care who my running backs are. We're going to go win games. But like you said, Dick, he wants 5 monsters up front, and that's the key to success.
And you know, if you go back, Dick, you're exactly right. Go back to every championship year, and then in Independence, every year where they've had double-digit wins, and look at the offensive line, because that's where they're really good. That's the core of greatness at BYU. And then great quarterbacks are made when they we watched some film of me playing back in the olden days with my boys. And there was one play, we were playing New Mexico, and I dropped back, and I probably went through 5 reads and finally dumped the ball off to Vaisika, who started off on the left sideline and then ran back across my vision all the way to the right sideline, and I swear I had the ball for 8 seconds. And all 3 of my boys looked at me and said, well, geez, Dad, anybody can complete a ball if you can stand back there for 8 seconds. You weren't that good. And I'm like, well, actually, didn't need to be that good. Our offensive line was that good. And you're thinking, I'm thinking about guys like Bart Oates that was up there, that's multiple Super Bowl champion.
Trevor
Maddich. You know, there's one after another, all of these NFL type guys up front. I feel like this offensive line this year, Dick, I agree with you. This line is as good as I can remember in the last 20 years. They have the potential to be as good as they've been in the last 20 years.
We're going to ask Elisa Tuiaki about his defensive line, but he's told us all spring, and you've been there, that the guys up front are going to be the ones who steal the headlines. His defensive line, which because there's no 9-star players up there, it's often attacked as that's the area where this place isn't growing. But you mentioned the depth on the offensive line a moment ago, the depth on the defensive line. They got 8 guys, all with playing experience, all bigger and stronger than they were last year.
Well, I think the key, and I think it's been shown the way by Blaine's former teammate Kyle Whittingham and his father Fred Whittingham. They had a philosophy that if you could get pressure with 4 down linemen, and you can switch a combo up, but 4-man rush, if you can do that, you can win a lot of football games because you can do things with coverage. You can bring some blitz. You can bring an extra person. It changes the game entirely. So if BYU stay, if this defense is going to be changed and the heat's going to be off Tuiaki, if they can get 4 down linemen that can get pressure, they did it with 3 a couple of times last year. Mm-hmm. They did 3 linemen that were rushing. They got pressure, but if they can do it with 4, it changes everything for Eliza Tuiaki. It really does.
I've got a quarterback quiz for you.
Oh, man.
But before we get to that,
I said I was going to ask him about basketball.
Yeah, we'll have that one too. So then we'll do this question, the quiz, and then come back to basketball.
Okay, because I'm scared to death about what's going to happen with college basketball. I just want to get Dick's take on it because he's been watching it for so long. But we want to do the quiz first?
Let's do the quiz. But the setup for the quiz is, what is the biggest story in BYU sports that you've covered over the years? And then we can throw out there's the Heisman, there's the national championship, there's this Big 12.
There's Jimmermania.
There's going independent. There was Jimmermania. What's number 1?
Oh, that's hard to say. I think you got to say, because BYU won the national championship and both the AP poll and the UPI poll, which that's all there was back in 1984. Yeah. That changed the face of college football. It brought in the Bowl Alliance, the Bowl Coalition, the BCS, and all of these things to keep a BYU from ever having that happen again. The resulting part of that is that you've had 13 schools that have traded and playing for the national championship since that time. So I got to think that because of what Lavelle Edwards did in getting BYU in that position and winning that game, a lot of people want to downplay BYU's win over Michigan. But there are a lot of schools that could have played BYU and they chickened out. Yeah. Oklahoma was one. Washington was another.
Right.
Somebody from the ACC. Who was it, Blaine? I think Florida.
Yeah,
Florida State.
I think it was Florida State.
They had a chance to come there and play, and they said no. So, you can't downplay what BYU did in an undefeated season when other people refused to come and play them for a title. They played who was right in front of them, and they beat them. But I think that changed the face of college, football for probably ever, in the way that the Blue Bloods then said, no more. That will never happen again. We can't allow it. And then I think probably the second thing, Jimmer was one of the great stories. We were all there in the Thomas and Mack when he scored those points against New Mexico. People came in at halftime. We're talking sports writers from around the country. They'd never seen anything like that before. His run, the attention that he got as the player of the year was tremendous. And I reflect back on Danny Ainge back in the 80s, the run he had against Notre Dame, getting them to the Elite Eight, which BYU's never been back. That was a tremendous run by Danny Ainge and his teammates in a team that was loaded. And Frank Arnold did a great job in assembling that team. There have been a lot of highlights. I think the Miracle Bowl against SMU, the first bowl game that Lavelle was able to win. Jim McMahon's going to be on campus, probably talking about that. But one of the greatest comebacks in the history of college football by a team that was talented, refused to quit, was down impossibly, able to come back, and they did. Those moments are probably the greatest that I can remember. Ty Detmer, covering him, and both of you have talked to him. You know him very well. Mm-hmm. But one of the class individuals that you'll ever meet, being in charge of a team that did so well, and he won the Heisman Trophy. All the awards, all the records that he set, 115 touchdowns, 121 touchdowns, more than 15,000 yards, the first player to ever do that. He threw a lot of interceptions, but man, was he a fun player to watch and to cover. Well, I still remember after the Texas A&M game, in the locker room, he had 2 separated shoulders. He had tears in his eyes. The Texas A&M team, a lot of guys that he went to high school with were making fun of him out on the field, and the kid with tears long after everybody had been interviewed, he sat there and he took the questions for as long as anybody wanted to talk to him. With a notebook and a microphone, he sat there like a man and he answered every question that he could. And I'll never forget that.
He told me today, we were talking about Texas leaving, probably happy they won't have to deal with BYU, just as a joke. And he made a quick response of, well, I'm glad Texas A&M isn't in the Big 12 because that didn't work out for him. Weren't all those events a precursor leading up to getting to P5, getting into the Big 12 or whatever league they were going to get into? But it seems like all of that was a battle of credibility, and we're here and we're building, and you're missing the boat by not inviting us. all those great stories you just mentioned, don't they culminate with the kickoff a year from September in the Big 12?
Oh, absolutely. They all built a layer upon layer upon layer. The tradition that BYU had under Lavelle Edwards, let's say, is one of the greatest in college football. Jimmy Bowden will tell you that. Joe Paterno will tell you that. What he did, how he did it, with what resources he did, and how much he was paid, one of the great stories of all time. And it's upon the shoulders of Lavelle Edwards that BYU enters the Big 12. And I think it's about time that was recognized in a decade where we've had social issues keep BYU out of progressing further, either the Pac-12 or the Big 12. And let's face it, that's what it was. It's a social barrier that BYU had to hop over, and this administration was able to do that, and I credit them.
You take it as an honor when we say no one's covered the Cougars longer than you on the entire planet, right? That's not us. That's not us saying you're older than.
No, I was telling
that's
him,
an honor. I'm throwing out there as an honor. I
was telling Dick that you contacted me when I was a senior in high school and wrote an article about me. I'll never forget that. And you've been so good to me over the years.
I got to say, I've known both of your fathers before I knew you two. Talking to them, working with them. I called Blaine's father to get some pictures and things when he's in high school. But yeah, it goes way back. It was a lot of fun time. And I got to say, both of your fathers, we just left Father's Day, but both of your fathers are some of the greatest people, some of the greatest men that I've ever met. And I'll say that honestly and right up front.
Yeah,
thank you, Dick.
They're both so much cooler than us. Yep. I mean, look at us.
Yep. Well, and Dale's watching. I know he keeps an eye on us, and I'm sure my dad's tuned in tonight. He watches hey, my dad gets on Twitch and watches the live stream. My sister helps him.
He's an All-American.
My sister helps him, but he gets on the live stream and watches.
He is an All-American. All right, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Blaine, I gave Blaine this quiz last week, and so I have his answer here. But I thought as you were coming on, I'm like, well, you know what? I want to ask Dick Harmon this question.
We'll see if you match up with me.
We'll see. We'll see where you're at. Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. It's 1st and 10. You've got 90 seconds to score. You've got 90 yards to score and 1 minute to do it. Who do you want leading that drive? It's first. It's first. Don't just jump in yet. I haven't even given the.
Complicates it.
Okay. I'm sorry.
He complicates it.
Multiple choice.
This is what he did to me the last 2 weeks. He complicates it, and sometimes he doesn't even give me the choice of who I would pick.
Yeah, it's
so
of this group.
He gives you four options. So
okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
1st and 10, 90 yards to score, a minute to do it. You got Ty Detmer, Jim McMahon, Max Hall, or Robbie Bosco. Those are the 4. And clearly you jumped the gun and went right to Jim McMahon, which is where Blaine went last week. So I'm just going to move on to question number 2.
Sorry.
All right.
And then we've got are we doing the instant poll like are the guys? Yeah.
Polls will be in and out.
So there you go. We're doing polls on these questions, and they're coming up on the screen too. So and everyone agreed with us on Jim McMahon, by the way. So
okay, now it's 3rd down and 15. You're throwing over the middle. Which tight end is your target? A, Dennis Pitta, B, Johnny Harline, C, Chris Smith, or D, Gordon Hudson? 3rd and 15, you're throwing over the middle. Who's your tight end target? Pitta, Harline, Smith, or Hudson?
Well, a couple of them there were All-Americans, Chris Smith and Gordon Hudson. I will go with Gordon Hudson because of the marriage he had with Steve Young. It was automatic. It was guaranteed. And it was over and over and over again, and nobody could do anything with it. If you're talking about breakaway speed, it's Chris Smith. But I think generally I'd say, okay, guaranteed here, it's Gordon Hudson.
Okay. Blaine went with Dennis Pitta on that one last week.
And hey, the crew, wow, they're a little bit split. But
it's hard.
And the reason I went with Dennis was I don't think Max even looked at anybody else on 3rd down other than Dennis. And everybody in the stadium knew he was going to Dennis. A lot like Steve and Gordo. Where it'd be like, well, Steve's going to throw it to Gordon right here, and nobody could stop it. I called Dennis a chain mover when he was playing because 3rd and whatever, Max was throwing it to Dennis. And it didn't matter whether they bracketed him, doubled him, or what they did. He was catching it, and BYU was getting a 1st down. So I picked Dennis.
I don't think you can go wrong there, but here's the thing. Look how many tight ends BYU has had that you'd want to throw to.
Yeah. Oh, every one of those would be great, right? And then some.
Going back, Todd Thompson. I don't know if you guys remember Todd Thompson.
Yeah, I remember Todd.
And Mills, David Mills, wasn't it David Mills?
Yeah, David Mills, Sluggo.
Yeah.
Sluggo is his nickname.
I mean, you go down the line, they're over and over and over again. And Pitt is probably the latest great one. So
no, and we're hoping that they reestablish that this year again with another great one. Hey, Matt Bushman before his injury was developing into one of those. Chad Lewis, Like you just can keep going. Tulamili. I'd throw to any of those guys on 3rd and 15.
Holker's coming along.
Yeah.
Holker, and then Isaac Reck's supposed to be back.
Led the nation with touchdown passes.
Yeah.
Tied with the Florida, the first-round draft pick.
And we didn't even mention Clay Brown, Jimmy's guy, Jimmy Mack's guy, Clay Brown.
All right, here's question number 3. It's 4th down and 1 at the goal line. There's time for one last play. You're going to call a running play to try to win the game. Who do you give the ball to? A, Jamal Williams, B, Luke Staley, C, Tyler Algier, or D, Harvey Unga? 1 yard, last play of the game. You got to score to win. Williams, Staley, Algier, or Unga?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
That is a hard one.
This is not an easy show. Not everyone can come on this show.
You know, Algier's in our mind. I think about him. He was so productive when he got down there. But I think I'll go with Harvey Unga because of the size and the strength that he had. And let's remember, he didn't play his senior year, but he was the all-time leading rusher in the history of BYU when he stepped out and quit football. We didn't see all of what Harvey could do, but he was one tough sucker.
Our Insta poll, it's interesting. In the Insta poll, 60% say Algier and 40% say Luke Staley.
Blaine went with Staley last week.
Oh, wait, and they've got some more. Now it's even more coming. Now it's 50% Algier, 33% Staley, and 17% Harvey Unga. I mean,
well, I think Staley. I think if you pitch the ball out.
Oh, now we got some Williams even.
The ball out.
Yeah.
You know, and he could run that 1 yard and score, but he could also maybe run 99 yards and score. So Staley, you know, you can't go wrong with any of these guys.
I mean,
that's not fair. Dude.
Harvey's going to run over him. Tyler's going to run around him more over him. Jamal's just going to be not denied.
Listen, there's no right answer. This is an opinion-based quiz.
I just told Dave. I remember when Luke was playing and Kyle was the D coordinator. Kyle just says that he's so ridiculous to try to defend in short yardage because they'll throw him the toss, and then the guys they'll have to run so hard to beat him to the corner that they overrun him because he's so fast for a big guy, and then he just puts his foot in the ground and runs back, and now you're arm tackling him, and he just runs right through all the arm tackles. And typically a kicker leads the nation in scoring. Luke Staley led the nation in scoring the year he won the Doak Walker Award. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to have a guy that's going to score, I'm going to do the nation's leading scorer. You know, I put Luke in there.
We got momentum. I'm going to lean into our defensive quiz. You got a couple more minutes to be with us?
Oh, absolutely.
Nice. All right. Okay. So we've got Blaine and we've got Dick Harmon. Now both are in play. And then we have our streamers around the globe that can chime in with their answers. So I'm going to propose a question. Then I'm going to give some options. And then we'll debate your answers.
Okay, I like this.
So we're going defense tonight. It is 3rd down and 3 at the BYU 27. The Cougars need a sack from a linebacker to knock the opponent out of field goal range. Who's going to get it? A, Leon White, B, Todd Shell, C, Kyle Van Noy, or D, Shea Muirbrook. You need a sack. It's 3rd and 3 at the 27. You've got to sack the quarterback and get them out of field goal range. Is it Leon White, Todd Shell, Kyle Van Noy, or Shea Muirbrook?
Who do you want to go first?
You go, Dick. You're the guest. You get to pick first.
To me, one of the greatest playmakers, I've seen it over and over again out of him, it was Kyle Van Noy. I mean, to get that sack, if you had to have it, maybe even a fumble, icing on the cake, Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, and our people streaming with us they're agreeing with you, and I 100% agree with you. I when I think of this question, I reflect back on that bowl game against San Diego State. I have never seen an individual defensive player decide to take over a game when the offense wasn't clicking that great and just go, you know what? It looks like we're going to have to win this game on defense, so let's do this. I'm going to go win this thing. And he just came up with 3 plays in a row, just ridiculous. And so I feel like if you have to have a play, that guy's going to dial up a play. He's going to go make a play for you. So I'm with you. I'm 100% with you on Kyle Van Noy.
26 sacks.
Ole Miss too. They don't win the game at Ole Miss if he doesn't sack the guy in the end zone, right?
We have a few that went with Todd Shell on the poll. One went with Leon White. Hey, I love some Leon White. I'll tell you that. That guy was amazing.
He had 17 sacks. Shell with 20. Van Noy had 26. Muirbrook had 19. And Van Noy's play against Ole Miss was the first game of independence back there, and BYU won it 14-13. Okay, that was a pretty easy one. That was just a teaser. That was like the shrimp cocktail that came out. Now you have to look at the menu, and things are going to get a little tougher. It's 1st and 10 at the opponent's 30. BYU's getting pressure with a 4-man rush. Which defensive lineman gets to the quarterback first? A, Jim Harmon, B, Jan Jorgensen, C, Jason Buck, or D, Ziggy Ansah, who didn't play nearly as much as the other three, but you just need to get a guy to the quarterback with a 4-man rush on 1st and 10 at the 30. Harmon, Jorgensen, Buck, or Ziggy? What do you got, Dick?
In Buck, you got a guy that, didn't get a Super Bowl ring, and he was an Heisman Trophy winner, and I think can't go wrong with that. But I think for just the sheer energy in the moment of a play, I'd go with Janimal. I'd go with Jan Jorgensen. Didn't he set a record for BYU for sacks in a game or a season or something like that?
30.
He did it.
He's 30 sacks.
30 sacks.
He's the all-time leader. Yeah. So
when's the last time you saw a 30 sack guy out of BYU?
Yeah. So
I'm trying to think when the last time I've seen a 5-sack guy. Just like try to get to the quarterback.
So here's my I'm reading this question. I'm going, okay, Jan's the sack leader. So there's something to be said for that. Jason Buck I played with, and I was thinking of the same things you were, Dick, that Heisman Trophy winner, Super Bowl champion with the Washington Redskins, relentless pass rusher, so quick around the corner, great feet and hands, former high school quarterback. But then I thought, am I talking about Ziggy Ansah at BYU, or I'm talking about Ziggy Ansah of the Detroit Lions healthy? Because Ziggy Ansah of the Detroit Lions healthy is a Pro Bowl defensive end. And so I went with him because I decided I'm going with the Ziggy Ansah that was at his potential, not the one that didn't know how to put his thigh pads in the pants when he was at BYU.
The question was BYU being on the 30-yard line.
Oh, crap.
Not the Detroit Lions.
That's an excellent point.
Okay.
Dick, so sometimes Blaine veers off.
Sometimes I make my own stuff up. I make my own stuff up.
But when you look at Ziggy in that 1 year, really, that we saw him as he was figuring out the game, and you're just in a play where you got to get to the quarterback, it was tough to block him.
Yeah,
it was
when he was at his peak in the NFL before he had all the injuries. He was unblockable in the NFL.
He's a Disney movie waiting to happen.
Yep, for sure.
I remember the first day I saw him at Tidwell. Paul Tidwell is the one that recruited him and brought him into practice. And he walked by me, and I was there, and I was kind of walking along, and I about stumbled and fell over looking at him. Yeah. He's a tremendous specimen.
Unbelievable. And remember, he had gone over to basketball practice, remember? Yeah. And Dave Rose and those guys, they're watching him, and they're going, okay, he doesn't have the fine motor skills to shoot and to catch and all that. But this dude is ridiculous. Like, if nothing else, he should be able to run down and cover kicks. We've never seen somebody more athletic running up and down the floor. Yeah. And he was running up and down the floor and throwing it down with two hands and beating everybody, and they're going, crazy. This guy needs to be on the football team. And then they talked to Paul, and Paul took him out for football. And this is why this is a Disney movie.
I remember when he scored a defensive touchdown. He got in the end zone. We were calling the game. I don't know if it was Washington State or somebody, but he didn't know what to do. He got in there. He's standing around.
Did I just do something?
His players are jumping around. He's like, and so then I think they worked on some things.
He may be the most imposing specimen to ever put on a BYU uniform. Don't you think, Dick?
I would agree to that.
Yep. But I'm with you. You go with Jan. I said Ziggy at his peak, but if I have to go with during the career, I'm going to go with Jason because I'm just going with one of my guys.
Homer on that one. All right, here's a tough one. It's 2nd down and 7 at the BYU 25-yard line. The Cougars need an interception in the secondary. Who gets it? A, Derwin Gray, B, Brian Mitchell, C, Tom Holmoe, or D, Gennaro Guilford. If you go to the stats, they're all pretty close. So you need one of those four to get you an interception. Who's it going to be?
I'll throw another name out there.
I gave you 4 selections. It's not an
Dave
essay.
Dave Atkinson set the school record for interceptions back in the early 70s or late 70s.
And notice there's no Tim McTye or Omar Morgan on here.
I can't include the whole team. I gave you a 4.
Two best cover guys that I've seen at BYU, and they're not there. Okay. I will say.
Don't make fun of first of all, I think that was an unfortunate stab at the person who wrote this quiz.
I will give it to a guy that I saw make interceptions at BYU and do it regularly. Had one, I think, against Georgia. For a touchdown.
Yeah.
I think he's got Super Bowl rings. If you're going to talk NFL like Blaine likes to do.
Don't let Blaine veer you off.
I'm going to say Tom Hummel. I'll give Tom a bone.
He had 13 picks.
So I went with
whatever you do not bring in the CFL. We've already ventured in the NFL. Do not bring in the Canadian
I'm
football.
going to go with Derwin Gray, and the reason I'm going to do it is, Brian played corner, Tom played corner in college, and Gennaro played corner, and I feel like, corners are always locked up in coverage. They're running. You're more likely to get a pick as a safety in this type of a situation. And so I think Derwin in the back end is going to close on the ball and come up and make a pick. And could he close? So.
All right, here's the toughest one coming. It's 1st and 10. The opponent catches a pass across the middle.
This is tough. Dick and I are going with the same one.
BYU needs somebody to lay a hit so hard that the receiver drops the ball. So who lays the hit? A, Thor Salanoa. B, Kurt Govea. C, Rob Freight Train Morris. Or D, Kyle Morrell. One of those four have got to hit the receiver and knock the ball out.
I can't have a Nakua in there, huh?
No, just these four.
Yeah. Okay, what were the three again? Thor
Salanoa, Kurt Govea, Rob Morris, and Kyle Morrell. We've got video of all of them have decapitated guys over the middle on occasion. But you just need one to do it. You need to get the football back.
You know what? I think we've got to give credit to an athlete at Viewmont High School who played for the Vikings. He's not with us any longer, but Kyle Morrell. He could lay a hit. He could cover. What a great safety. What a great mind. Never got the credit that I think he deserves, but I'll go with Kyle Morrell for hitting somebody.
That's a good choice.
Yeah,
that is a good choice.
We watched.
I know who you're going
I was
with.
watching film with my boys one time, and they're like, "Dad, I think Kyle Morrell would have gotten kicked out of the first quarter of every game," which is true. You got to remember that targeting was not a rule when we were playing. Kyle used to either lead with his head and knock guys out, or throw his forearm right into the side of their head, which is also targeting. So he would make some big hits. But I'm going with Kurt Govea simply because of the Hawaii game in 1985. And Dick, you'll remember this. Walter Murray runs a slant. Walter Murray is an All-American wide receiver at Hawaii. And we're in zone coverage, and Kurt drops out, and he's right there in line with Walter, and he hits him pretty hard. But Walter catches the ball, and I'm thinking, ooh, that was a great catch. But then Walter made the mistake that he got up and he tossed the ball at Kurt and got in his face a little bit. And I remember leaning over to one of my buddies and going, why do you want to poke the bear like that? That's like not smart.
It is not smart.
And it couldn't have been more than 3 plays later. Walter Murray's running the same route, but this time Kurt's just a little bit deeper. The first thing that hit the ground was the back of Walter Murray's head, and then Kurt just got up quietly and just goes, over the top of him and walk back to the huddle. And Walter was out.
The deke leader.
He was
First
out cold. And I'm like, well, that's what happens. Why do you mess with Kurt Govea? So I gave it to Kurt. We got, some of our streamers here are saying
the freight
train Morris. There's some good support for the freight train. Hey, any one of these guys will smack you.
I put Thor on there. Isn't Thor like the godfather of Hawaii?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
if you need something, you call Thor. Isn't that pretty?
I haven't been
pretty much understood.
And guess what? Thor was on campus this past week for the first time in like 20 plus years.
No kidding.
Maybe even longer. And he was on campus and was around, which was really neat to see. Yeah, Thor is. You know how Dave McCann was the hookup? I always tell you, like, Dave McCann is the hookup in Vegas of all times. Like, you need to go golf, you need a steak, you need whatever.
That's a little inflated.
Dave's your
story.
guy. Thor Salanoa in Hawaii, like, what do you need? And you got it. He's connected. Maybe too connected. I'm a little worried about Thor because he might be too connected.
If somebody's tailing you and you call Thor, they stop tailing you. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Like, if you get pulled over by the cops, and they're like, hey, I just want you to know that Thor Salanoa is my buddy. Like, oh, yeah, you can go.
That's unconfirmed.
Which, by the way, that is unconfirmed.
Don't try that if you're listening to the
I have to tell you guys,
tonight.
that happened to me in Philadelphia when I had Vi Sikahema in the car with me. So I turned right on red, and there was a sign behind a tree that said no right on red.
But you couldn't see it. It was behind the tree.
And so I turned right, and the siren went off, and I was like, what? What did I do? And Vi goes, oh, crap, you're not supposed to turn right on that corner. And we were in kind of a rough section of town. Police officer walks up to the window and says, license and registration. And I said, you know what? And we were in my rental car. I go, this is a rental car, officer. So I don't know where the registration is, but here's my license. And Vi leans over from the passengers. He says, officer, I'm sorry. He's not from here. I should have told him. And the police officer like bends down. He goes, Vi, sick of him, is that you? And Vi goes, yes, officer. And he goes, oh, when you beat up
the goalpost?
No. He goes, when you beat up Jose Canseco
yeah.
and you gave the money to the firefighter in this town, that was epic. And when you beat up the goalpost at the Giants Stadium, that was awesome. And then he goes, what are you guys doing in this part of town? And we said, we're actually heading over to a friend's to watch Vi's buddy Bernard Hopkins fight on pay-per-view because Vi's too cheap to buy cable.
Yeah.
And the police officer says, well, let me get you guys out of this neighborhood. Why don't I escort you guys out of this neighborhood because it's kind of a rough neighborhood. So just follow me out of here. No problem. Put your license away. This is all good.
Nice.
So Vi did run Philadelphia, by the way.
He still does. Even though he's here, he still does.
Vi, is that you? I'm like, oh, man, what is going on here?
All right, here's the last question for you, Dick. It's a big game. Who's most likely to lead the Cougars in tackles? A, Kyle Whittingham. B, David Nixon. We threw Nixon in there because he's our broadcast partner. C, Brandon Ogletree. Put him in there because his dad's our stake president.
And 246 tackles.
Yeah.
Over his career.
And D, Brian Keel. It's a big game. Who's going to lead the team in tackles in that game? Whittingham, Nixon, Ogletree, or Keel?
Man, I have all the respect in the world for the Whittinghams, and I've seen Kyle do it. Team captain, tough guy. All those Whittinghams. You look at Kerry, you look at Kyle. Brady played on the other side,
Freddie played fullback, yeah.
But man, that is a tough one.
I'll throw you some stats.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say Ogletree. I'm going to say Ogletree because he was undersized. I like Muirbrook too. You don't have his name on there.
But, he was a machine. Yeah.
But Tree did some real good work with that defense for Bronco Mendenhall. And
22 and a half tackles for loss.
Yeah, he's not the name. He's not the name in that, but the guy is really crafty at what he did. And I'm just going to say that to be different mainly, but I'll take Tree.
Let me tell you about Tree's dad. Tree's dad calls me up, our stake president.
Yes.
And asked if
We're in the same stake, by the way.
And I asked, they let Blaine and I be in the same stake, which clearly they don't know.
Typically that's a violation, but they let us in the same stake.
So they asked me to speak at this patriotic thing this coming Sunday night at the Stake Center.
Yeah, by the way, Dave's speaking at the Patriotic Fireside next Sunday.
Yeah, I said, what about a topic and how many minutes? He goes, well, I'll try not to take more than 40 minutes. And then I just stopped talking. Like, what, 40 minutes? It's like, but anyway, his son Brandon Ogletree won your vote tonight, so that's got to help.
That's good stuff. I'm going to go with Kyle Whittingham. My old roommate,
you are?
My old roommate. I lived at the Whittingham's house. I've never seen anyone more intense on a game day.
Or cheap, right?
He wouldn't turn the heat on.
So you went across the street and stole firewood from the neighbors. Is that correct?
The Hoffines might be listening right now. I don't want the Hoffines to know this.
Well, the Whittinghams might be listening too, and they should know that they encouraged you guys to go and steal firewood.
Kyle would come home, and I would have turned the heat on, and he would basically say, why did you turn the heat on? You're going to pay the whole bill this month or I'm going to beat the crap out of you. And I would say, Kyle, we're freezing. And Brenda would be over under 5 blankets. Kyle, we're freezing. He goes, then do the right thing and go across the street to Hoffines and steal some firewood and build a fire in the fireplace. So I would sneak over to the Hoffines, go into the backyard, get some firewood and build a fire. Cheapest guy ever. So
I feel like we owe an apology to the Hoffines.
But intense, very intense. No, I think the Hoffines knew I was stealing their work.
Yeah, they thought it was okay.
When it was all said and done, I think they knew that Kyle was sending me over there. And they felt bad for us because they knew that Kyle was running the house with an iron fist and wouldn't let us turn the heat on in the winter.
Yeah, that's not right.
Yeah, so
can't go wrong with Kyle. Really,
Kyle's intense, and he like Mike Singletary type intensity at middle backer. And if it's a big game, he was always unbelievably dialed in, and he would just run. And here's the other thing: to me, it had to either be Tree or Whittingham, because Dave and Brian played outside backer, and middle backers just flow from sideline to sideline, and typically have an opportunity to make more tackles. So to me, I would bring it down to Kyle or Tree. Tree's a great choice, but I'm going to go with Kyle on this one.
Is Kyle misunderstood by Cougar Nation? Dick, I did an interview with him a few years ago for Father's Day about the people who've influenced his life, culminating with his dad. There's a soft side to Kyle. He doesn't show very often, but when you see it, much like Jim McMahon said today, and what Gift told us about Jim McMahon is, there's a side to Jim McMahon that makes him the most gracious, humble, kind-hearted guy that doesn't translate over to the Jim McMahon we saw wearing number 9. What about Whittingham? Are we misreading him?
I think things that have happened have caused a layer upon layer in the minds of BYU fans. But I've been in his house, his father's house. I know his brothers. I know his mother. I've always had a lot of great respect. It's not his fault necessarily that he accepted a BYU job. He accepted that job from Fred Skousen.
Yeah.
And then Chris Hill called and offered him more money, and he took it. But he was coming home. He was going to come home. But yeah, I think if you understand, Kyle, my brother Phil, I'm in my brother's house right now because my grandkids are running crazy at my house. My brother Phil and Kyle were teammates at Provo High School.
Yeah.
And so I've known this family for a long, long time. And it's too bad that Kyle didn't come home and play at BYU because he'd have been a great football coach. And I think Tom Homo would agree with that. He was a teammate of his, and I think he's made several offers to get Kyle to come here and coach, but that hasn't been in the works. Not when you're making that much money, and he had to do what he could for his family. Well, before you leave that, though, with Jim McMahon, can I just share one story?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
When I was just up and coming, the Daily Herald, the sports writer, and trying to make some extra money, I did a radio show on KEYY in Provo. And that station is way out in West Provo, way
out by the lake.
Yeah, it's hard to find. But I made a request of Ralph Zobel if I could get Jim McMahon on the show. And he says, yeah. And then he called me back and says, Jim wants to come down to the studio. Would that be okay? I said, yeah. Well, I didn't think that would happen because it's hard to find, number one. And number two, it's Jim McMahon. And number three, how in the heck is he going to find his way there? But 5 minutes before we went on the air, there he pulled up in this green Duster. His girlfriend, he left him in the car while he came in. He sat down and did a 20-minute interview with somebody who was nobody. But he kept a commitment to do that. And there are many Jim McMahon stories that people don't know. This is one of them, but things that he did for people. He was an unbelievable, he's an unbelievable person if you get to know him. The other stuff is the circus stuff, but Jim McMahon is the real guy.
Yeah. And Dick, what people don't understand is Jim's crazy smart too, especially in the peak of his career with the Bears. So he understood. It's like he had this persona and this almost caricature of who he was, and that translated to millions of dollars in endorsement deals. And he knew exactly what he was doing with and how he did it. And behind the scenes, he's kind and gracious, and he's a good dad, and Jim's been nothing but kind to me. He still calls me kiddo every time he sees me. He's like, hey, kiddo, because I was a freshman when he was a senior. He took me under his wing, and a couple weeks ago we told the Danny Plater story, how he made Danny catch balls from me, helped me learn the game. He was great to Steve Young, and he, there's a very soft side Jim, and it was really fun to catch up with Jim at Danny Plater's funeral, and he was so much better. This treatment he's been getting in New York to help with his headaches and with that whole issue. From all the concussions, he was night and day better when we saw him a few months ago, and you saw him today and interviewed him, Dave. Yeah. He's doing better, and that's great to see because he's a great human being.
Dick, what's going to kill college basketball first, the NIL or the transfer portal?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's probably the transfer portal. We've seen it happen already. I mean, it's just musical chairs. And how can you build chemistry? How can you recruit? How can you give people playing time? How can you take playing time away from guys when they can go and play immediately if they just get ticked off and they're going to leave? How is that basketball? How is that team? You can't even do that in the NBA.
Right.
You've got contracts, you've got free agency, you've got all sorts of stuff, but this is just naked free agency that's gone wild. And I think it'll destroy the chemistry that coaches try to get in teams. I think coaches they're pulling their hair out right now to deal with the transfer portal. It's crazy.
We mentioned here it's a challenge for BYU because as BYU recruits a kid, by the time they get to campus, they understand the honor code, they understand the church sponsorship. In the portal, you might meet a kid on the portal in 1 week and he's out taking a visit. And if he's a certain height, you really want him. And then he comes here and finds out, wait, what? I don't even like with Gary Scheide when Lavelle was recruiting him. I've never even heard of your school. And so here come these guys. And so they come to campus. They go, why? A big 6', whatever kid came through, and it's like, why didn't he commit? It's like, because he thought it was crazy?
Yeah.
Because he wants to party? He wants to go to SMU instead. But I think the portal for BYU is an added challenge because you get kids overnight, not ones that you've schooled for since they were sophomores.
Yeah.
And it's hard to – there's just the right kind of kid has to come. I'll tell you, though, we were talking about this a few weeks ago. You had these 4 kids that came in, African-American kids that bet on BYU 4 years ago and came in. D'Angelo Mandel, kind of led the pack on this and put their faith in BYU. And they all have this year's eligibility left, and they all just graduated.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that they're the first college graduates in their families. And BYU has something to sell out there above and beyond NIL and all that. And that is, you come here and you are going to get an education that is unique, that is going to set you apart, that if you don't go play in the NFL, and you already talked about the odds of that, you're going to be set up for life because you're going to be different than the kid that just went to San Diego State or to Fresno State. And I think Kalani and his crew is doing a really good job of selling that. And Mark Pope's been doing a pretty good job of selling that as well. But they have to think of ways to sell differently because they can't compete with NIL dollars and all these other things that people are throwing in front of these players, especially in basketball.
I think they've got a great example in the league that they're going to in the Big 12 with Baylor. Baylor's a religious school. Baylor just won the football championship. They won a national basketball championship. But I was talking to somebody about that, and I said, "How are they doing it? How are they getting these players there?" And I was told that the school is going to these mothers, a lot of them single mothers, and saying, "We will take care of your son and make him a man, and he's not going to be out just doing all sorts of crap. We're going to take care of him." Yeah, and they talk to them as a Christian. And they talk to them as somebody who's going to shepherd them and help them. And that's what those mamas, they care about money, yeah, but they care about their sons. They don't want to end up being shot at a party somewhere. And so Baylor's done a great job of pulling that trigger. It's the same trigger that BYU can pull, Blaine.
Yep, I agree with you, Dick. It's a great way to sell it, and it's real. It's real. So
8 minutes after 9 on the East Coast. So you know what I'm going to do? Since you guys questioned some of my questions, I'm going to come back with one more.
Okay, one more.
I'm going to finish up with one more.
We got this. We'll finish up with the big one. Here we go.
All right, it's 4th down and 8. The opponent's driving late in the game. You need a lockdown defender to bat the pass away.
4th and 8 late in the game.
Lockdown defender to bat the pass away. Is it A, Daniel Sorensen, B, Tim McTire, C, Rodney Rice, or D, Aaron Francisco? I feel good. Just the silence right there makes me feel good.
Those are all great choices. I'm going to go with one of the tandem that I thought was the best cover corner tandem in BYU school history, and that's Tim McTire and
Omar.
He was a great – and Omar. You put those two together, I've never seen man coverage like that at BYU before. 1996 Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
They shut down Snyder's offense pretty good and held it in check and made huge plays at the end.
Yeah, held them to 15 points, and one was a Hail Mary before halftime?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Blaine, who do you got?
I was also going to go Tim. Here's what's going to happen, though. Tim's going to bat the ball away, and then Aaron Francisco is going to hit the guy so hard that all of the wind comes out of him, and he can't breathe for 2 days.
And then Daniel Sorensen picks the ball off.
Daniel Sorensen is going to pick it off.
Pitches it to Rodney Rice.
On the tip and pitch it to Rodney for the touchdown.
Do you remember Rodney Rice's pick 6 against Texas in Provo when we just killed him?
Yep.
That was the year after my mission to San Antonio. Yeah. Texas comes up. BYU would beat them down there miraculously. A funny story about that. My companion and I were travelers through the mission at that time, and BYU comes down. My dad writes the mission president and asks him if we can stay with them for the game. And my mission president was cool, and we were hard workers, so we said yes. So Elder Anderson and I, we go to the team hotel at the Marriott. We stay with my dad. We have breakfast with Lavelle, literally at his table with him. And my companion's having this out-of-body experience, and I'm like, this is just game day. This is what we do. We sat in the president's loge and ate lasagna and ice cream while BYU beat Texas, I think 22-17. Oh. The beauty of that story is, for the previous 3 months when I was serving in the university ward in Austin, we talked so much smack that BYU was going to come down and beat them, knowing that we had no chance. But they did. They came down and they beat them. And I had already been reassigned down to San Antonio, so I didn't even get to go back to talk smack, which is probably good.
Yeah, it's probably good.
It was probably
you don't want
good.
to gloat in that.
But the following year, some of the Texans came up here for the rematch, and I remember Rodney Rice got a pick, and he must have run 60, 70 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah, these guys, I'm telling you, Danny and Aaron, played in the back end, and both of those guys were tremendous physical hitters and ball hawks, and then did the same in the NFL. Aaron was knocking people out in the NFL. Francisco, and then Tim and Rodney played that corner position and were fantastic. Those are great choices. I'm with Dick though. I'm going Tim McTire. So.
I feel good that you guys didn't dog my options.
Those were great choices right there. So
solid.
Dick, tomorrow for the first time since 2011, we're going to have a media day where you won't have to ask the question, what about this uncertain future with independence, and is it sustainable? How refreshing will that be that has come to an end?
It's historic, really. You think about that. You think about the weekend of that announcement when BYU learned that they would be in the Big 12, and then it was, I think, the same weekend they beat the University of Utah and ended that streak. That probably fed more fuel into the souls of BYU fans than just about any event in the last 25 years, I think. It gave them hope. It gave them a vision. The chip is off your shoulder. They've been treated bad. They've been neglected. They've been left out. When you look around at the facilities and they have everything, even more than some teams have. You look at a packed stadium, maybe the second biggest one in the West, and for what? For naught. But that day it changed, and that win changed things.
Yeah. Hey, and just for the record, while you were up and coming there at the Daily Herald, I was like 9, and I was delivering your stories to the doorsteps of, I think, 37 people on my route as a Daily Herald paper boy. And now we're hanging out on mass media all over the world. Things have certainly changed, haven't they?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And the bad thing about that is they made you go collect the money from the subscribers.
$4.25.
Right.
They had to go
I
collect
can still
that
tell you that I can still tell you the houses that paid me a 50-cent tip.
Hey, Dick, I love while you were talking, Dick. One of our subscribers, and I said it's 1010 forever.
All right,
is what it is. He goes, "Preach it, DH!" with an exclamation point. He was loving it. But he also, and then we have Thon. Let's see, is it Thon 207? Said BYU owns Texas, which is true. It's interesting that Texas and Oklahoma could be in that league for a year longer than we thought. BYU's got tremendous success against Texas. We got that great win against Oklahoma. Dick, how cool is that going to be to likely get a home and home with those two teams before they leave the league?
It's tremendous. It's tremendous. This whole thing is great. It's going to be a great league. You look at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's going to be awful tough. We've seen the speed of the University of Houston.
Yeah.
You can recruit to Central Florida. This league is going to be good. I think in some ways it'll be. You can't say it's going to be better without Oklahoma and Texas, but I think when those two get in that league in the SEC, and week in and week out see what's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wish that they were back in the Big 12.
Yep.
Well, I think too that Kansas State, a number of those Big 12 schools that are staying, when they see these four coming in, these four aren't going to the bottom like a lot of teams that join leagues. If you're Kansas, you're not careful, you're going to stay at the bottom.
Yeah. If we were to do this, I'm gonna this is gonna be a tough one for you guys. Put these four teams in the league last year. Where does Cincinnati finish in that league last year? And where does BYU finish in that league last year? I still think Baylor wins the league, but I think Cincinnati gives them a run for the money to win that league last year.
Yep.
So where do you see them finishing? Where would Cincinnati finish, and where would BYU finish in the league last year?
I think Cincinnati finishes second and maybe even wins the league. They were very good. They were a top 3 team. I think BYU proved that they over time was, when they were healthy, they were a top 12 team. And I think they would have been a top 4 team in the Big 12 last year at the peak of when they were healthy. Mm-hmm. No question.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I agree. And they would have loved to have played Texas. And they love playing Texas.
Yeah, they just love to play Texas.
At some point, we're going to have Sarkisian back here in Provo. That'll be kind of cool because Steve is He wasn't here very long, but he was the part of the Cotton Bowl championship team. And then he's had his troubles and he's had his successes, and now he's got this huge job with expectations that are so beyond what's realistic. But it'd be nice to have him back.
Yeah, Steve, he's got his hands full there because the culture at the University of Texas football program has been bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're entitled 4-star, 5-star athletes that come in, and I don't know how hard they work, but they can go anywhere in town and get a meal. They can go to the bars and get what they want. They've been entitled, they've been spoiled. And Steve has had to come in and try to change that. It's been hard. It's been, as you look at what happened to him, it's an uphill battle with them.
Yeah.
Like it was for Southern Cal the last 4 or 5 years, right? Right, Blaine?
Yeah.
They have really struggled with that entitlement issue.
Because they're like the word we all use is soft. USC soft.
Yes.
Which USC back in the day, not only did they have all those skills, but they had attack dogs at every other position, right? They were a tough blue collar physical program under Pete Carroll that turned into a program where you go, USC's soft, and BYU beat the heck out of them at the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
And then in terms of coverage, they surprised them by dropping 8, which nobody had done to them, and then beat them up at the line of scrimmage, so they couldn't run the ball. And that's not supposed to happen at USC, but they were soft. So
I always
trying
thought
to change that.
USC will never be back to a national power until they return to running the football, but then they hired a coach that's not interested in running the football. They're going to just throw it all over the place, and they're getting recruits. And the Pac-12 needs USC to be a national story, or they are easily dismissed.
As a kid that grew up in New York,
Final Four.
Nobody cares what anybody other than USC and Oregon do in that league. Nobody cares back east.
Yeah.
So,
Dick, do we need to send your brother a fruit basket for allowing you to commandeer his home?
Well, I'll tell you this, Dick. Dave and I owe you a round of golf at the country club.
Yeah,
you need to come out with us.
Tell your brother when we said 15 minutes, what we meant was
an hour. But
hey, your credibility helps this show, and we're just glad to have some time with you.
Well, thanks. You guys are my favorite people in the world. It's always fun to eat the pregame meal with you and see you guys going through your notes and just trading a couple of thoughts here and there. You guys are the greatest. Good luck with your podcast, your program, your Twitch, everything you do. Hopefully it turns to gold because you guys are golden.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
All right. Hey, we'll see you in the morning. Get some rest. We got a long day tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
All right, fellas. Thank you.
The great Dick Harmon from the Deseret News. You can read all of his stuff at deseret.com. And he has been covering the Cougars longer than any media person in the state of Utah or the other 49 states in the country. And he's trusted. Ute fans don't really like him. That means he's doing a good job being a BYU columnist because
that means he's doing great.
He writes to his audience. He knows his audience and writes to them. And we'll look forward to his coverage tomorrow.
And he's always right on the money with his analysis and all that. Does a great job.
He's a friend of our dad's and all that stuff. And so